So you want to test knit, but you're not sure where to start, or you did a test knit that was a little bit weird, or a million other things could have happened. I hope that this video is for you, because in this video we're going to be talking all about the world of test knitting, why you need to know about it, what to expect, and just some questions that you guys have had. My name is Erin. I have been knitting for 1.5 years, and in that time I have done about 8 test knits. Test knitting and knitting in general has basically taken over my life, as you can see by the yarn behind me, and I feel like my skills as a knitter has just kind of expedited with the amount of time that I spend knitting in a day, and I have been very, very lucky to be able to test knit for some amazing designers. And so I'm going to be talking about my experience test knitting, how I got into it, and everything else. So if you'd like to watch that, subscribe, send a like, and stay tuned. So the first thing you may be wondering is, how do I get into test knitting? I remember when I was a new knitter, I would see people in podcasts or on Instagram saying, hey, I'm part of this test knit, this is what I'm testing, etc., etc. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I want to do that, but I have no idea how. And I can say that getting into test knitting can be difficult for some people. Test knitters have certain requirements that they want to reach. And also on top of that, a lot of test knitters require previous test knitting experience to be chosen. This is not true for all test knitters, but it is certainly true for some. So my best piece of advice for new test knitters is to start with a newer designer. Chances are you're not going to be test knitting for the biggest designers out there like Andrea Mowry or I don't know, Petite Knit. First off, a lot of them don't have open calls for test knitters, but secondly, a lot of them are looking for established knitters to be able to do tests in, and tests outside of North America often want people speaking their language to test their patterns in. So I would look for some smaller designers, people with 1 or 2 patterns out that are looking for testers. Second, I would make sure that you are active on social media. Instagram especially. Almost every single one of the tests that I have been a part of, I have found out from following a designer on Instagram. Almost every tester or designer that I know will send out a test call, or at least mention the fact that they're going to be opening a test call soon on their Instagram. Where are these test calls? So some of them are on Instagram itself. They'll send you to a Google form. Some of them you have to be part of their mailing list. You sign up for a mailing list and they'll say, hey, we're looking for testers. You sign up through that mailing list. And then some of them happen through Ravelry forums. So if you are active on Ravelry, you may see that some designers have forums dedicated to themselves and their work. And that is another great way to make sure that you get on the list for tests, is to keep an eye out on those community tabs. Even with all 3 of those, I think Instagram is your best bet. Even if they're on a mailing list, even if they are on these forums, almost every single designer that I've known have said, hey, sign up to my mailing list so that you get an email saying that you want to test this upcoming knit. Now, a lot of people have asked me, how do you get into these tests? I've applied to a whole bunch of test knits and I haven't gotten selected. Well, designers are looking for different things, and it really depends on what designer you are applying for. First of all, I will say that almost every single knitwear designer I've seen out there is desperately looking for some more plus size test knitters. So if you often fall into the largest 3 sizes of a test range, especially when their test ranges are 9 to 10 sizes and you're in the upper 3 sizes, chances are you have a very, very good likelihood of getting chosen for tests, because test knitters often struggle to fill those sizes. And there's multiple reasons for that. It's not just because there's a lack of plus size people in the world. That's obviously not true, but it's often that some testers have very narrow test windows. For example, I'm on a test knit right now that had only a month long to test a full sweater. That's a really quick turnaround, and if you can imagine, I'm knitting a size large. If someone's knitting a 4XL, that could be twice as much knitting that they have to complete in a month. And so plus size knitters might look at that and say, I can't do that. There's some testers that are accommodating for that. They will have a different deadline for smaller sizes than for larger sizes. But I will say, if you are someone who wants to knit a larger size for yourself or for a family member, you are much more likely to be selected for a test knit. As I've said before, some testers want you to have experience as a test knitter. So if this is your first time, that doesn't work for you, but a lot of them will ask, hey, have you tested for anyone before, and who have you tested for? And that's just to gauge if you have done a test knit of the caliber that they're looking for. A lot of testers require you to have some kind of social media presence. I would say maybe over half of the ones that I've been a part of require you to have a dedicated knitting Instagram page. And so that if that's something that you don't have, I would consider setting one up and using that to apply to your test knits with. And a lot of them require you to make a project page on Ravelry as well. So if you don't have Instagram and you don't have Ravelry, I think finding test knits might be a little bit difficult for you. But if you're willing to set those things up, or those are things that you already have, that's great too. A lot of people are looking for those social media numbers. Test knitting is not only an opportunity for designers to be able to test out their patterns, make sure people can read it well and can design these patterns, but it's also an opportunity for them to get their pattern up there. If you are testing and you are talking about it on social media, you're raising the hype of whatever pattern it is. And so I've seen some knitwear designers openly say that they are looking for people to test their patterns who have more than X followers. So I will say that because I have a YouTube channel and I have an Instagram following, much less of an Instagram following, I am more likely to be selected for test knits because I am able to talk about the things that I'm testing on here. I'm able to show those things on Instagram, and I have decently quality photos that when I put it up on Ravelry, someone might see that and say, hey, I want to knit that. They did a great job of it. They have inspired me to make the same piece. And a lot of knitwear designers are looking for that as well. That is not to say that you need to have a social media following by any means to do a test knit. I know for a fact that one of my favorite people to test for, who I tested this sweater for, is Sari Nordland, and she does not require a social media following to test for her. She just has a sign up on her Ravelry page. So you just require Ravelry. And so don't think that if you don't have any kind of social media following, or if you're not interested in having a social media following, that you are completely out of the running for test knits. There are a lot of people who run test knits just on Ravelry. I've also seen some Reddit groups that are dedicated to finding test knitters. I will try and put those down below. But I will say that having an Instagram or having some kind of social media following, if that's something that you were interested in getting into or you're open to getting into, will only help you if you're trying to join into a test knitting community. What else are people looking for? People are looking for either you to use the specific yarn that they knit the pattern in, or a diverse selection of yarns to knit the pattern in. Why would they want either of these? So it is very common in Scandinavia, especially for testers, to be sent yarn to do the test with. It's called a yarn sponsorship. It's really nice. I have never been privileged enough to have one, but if you watch a lot of Scandinavian, I've seen it especially with Danish knitters, if they get signed up for a test, yarn will be sent to them so that they can knit the pattern in a very specific yarn. Another much more common thing that people are looking for is to see their pattern in a diverse range of yarn. So for example, the Marzipan pullover by Sari Nordland, what I'm wearing now, she had knit this initially in Knitting for Olive. I knit mine in Cascade 220. Something that she didn't ask for this, but something that a designer might have been looking for is people knitting the same thing in a variety of yarns, or in a variety of combinations of yarns. I know a lot of people who knit a pattern in a fingering with a mohair that equals a DK weight are also looking to have people test their pattern with just a DK weight yarn to see what it looks like if it's not as fluffy, to see what it looks like with perhaps a little bit more, not ease, but like perhaps a little bit of a see-through fabric. They want to see what it looks like in different colors. They want to see what it looks like on different bodies. And so the diversity of yarn, but also of people, is really important. I know a lot of testers these days are looking for testers of diverse body shapes and sizes, of people of all colors, of all orientations. They're looking for a really diverse group of people. And so if you look like me, for example, you may not be privileged among other people that perhaps have more diversity. And I think it's amazing that people are looking for diverse testers when sending out those calls. And that is another reason why people will often ask for your Instagram profile. Sometimes they're not looking at your followers. Sometimes, as scary as it is, they're looking at you. They want to make sure that the test group they're selecting has diversity in all things, in size, color, age, etc. I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that they don't want their testers looking like them. And so they're looking for people that don't look like them. And let's face it, a lot of knitwear designers tend to look kind of like me. And that's something that's changing in the market, but it's certainly something to consider. And the last thing that people are really looking for is your ability to commit to a deadline. A lot of people want testers that have tested before because it proves that you're able to complete a test knit. A big problem in test knitting is people signing up saying, hey, I can knit this sweater in 2 months, and they don't finish it. And that is not a great return on investment for the pattern designers that are looking for testers for their patterns. And so they want to make sure that you are signing on to test that pattern and that you're going to have it done within a certain amount of time. That said, almost every single person that I have tested it for has been incredibly understanding if something cannot go through. I have been very lucky that I have completed all my test knits on time. But I mean, if there was a crisis in my life and I wasn't able to, I feel very comfortable with the people that I've tested for, except for one, that I'd be able to say, hey, I can't finish this, and they would be completely fine. Some test knitters require you to sign on to a contract. In that contract will say, you will have to pay for the pattern that you're testing if you do not complete the test. So into that goes into the perks of test knitting. Let's talk a little bit about why you would want to spend your time test knitting. And the first one, the one that people cite a lot, is that you get a free pattern out of it. So when you test knit something, the pattern is sent to you for testing, and then often a finished version of that pattern will be sent to you at the end. So you'll be sent something on Google Drive, or so I've seen people do it on Canva. I've seen people do it just over email, but you'll be sent a pattern and then a final pattern once it's completely through testing. So you get a pattern for free, which is really nice. Most often, people who test a pattern will be offered another pattern from the knitwear designer's portfolio. So for example, when I knit this for Sorry Nordlund as a test, she gave me a code that I could use on Ravelry to download any other of her patterns for free. So not only did I get the marzipan pattern, but I also bought her Thaka pattern, and I got both of them for free for testing. That is a nice perk. You are obviously putting in a lot of hours and time to be putting in to be testing their knitwear. So it's obviously not like a pay per hour kind of situation. That is not what this is at all, but it is I think of it more as a thank you gift of you get this pattern, but you also get another. Other people say a lot of the perks of test knitting is being part of a test knitting community. Most test knits that I've been a part of have had some kind of chat going on. Often it's on Instagram, where you can chat with the other people that are also testing the pattern. You can see what they're knitting, what colors they're knitting it in. They'll often give updates, or you can problem solve together. And it's a really lovely way to meet people if that is something that you are wanting to do, is to meet other fellow knitters. To be honest, I'm usually not the most involved in those Instagram chats. That's just me, but there's a lot of people that are really involved, and while I'm not as vocal in those chats, I'm definitely always hearting things. I love to see how other people's knitwear is coming along. One of the other perks that a lot of designers offer is that if you are trying to grow your Instagram following, they will often shout you out in their own Instagram. So for example, I knit for the Knit Pearl Girl. I've done 2 of her test knits now, and whenever I post a photo of a knitwear design that I am testing for her, she's always reposted it to her Instagram in her stories. That is not a reason that I personally would choose to test knit for. Just as an anecdote, I have never seen a return from larger knitters reposting my posts. It just doesn't really happen, but if that's something that interests you, that's great too. And also, some tests will give you yarn. Again, this is much more common in the Scandinavian countries, but some testers will give you yarn to knit the pattern if you are testing for them. So that can also be a huge perk of the job if you're willing to test knit. So test knitting sounds pretty cool. Why wouldn't you want to test knit? Well, you are getting an unfinished product. So when you get the pattern, oftentimes it's not completely finished. Sometimes, most of the time, it has been tech edited, the numbers have gone over, but sometimes there's some mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes can cost you a lot of hours. I once test knitted something that had a very large V-neck, and because I was knitting one of the larger sizes that was offered, the V-neck was not designed for someone that is larger in mind. And so my V-neck went down to here, almost to my belly button, and I had to rip back pretty much the whole body to be able to fix it. And ultimately, I ended up ripping back that whole sweater, and although I tested it and finished it for her, I did not keep it. I ripped the whole thing out. And that is always a possibility when you're test knitting, that you could be receiving a product and it doesn't work out at all. I have read on Instagram, some people say that they have been part of a test group, and then all of a sudden people start having problems, and then the pattern never goes to production. And although the designer is very thankful, you don't really get a finished design out of it, and the tester or the knitwear designer may send you one of their other patterns, but ultimately it was a huge time sink for you, and you never really got a finished object out of it. So I would just keep those things in mind. I think that a lot of people, when they go into test knitting, thinks, oh, I'm gonna get this free pattern and it's going to be great and it's gonna look exactly like the photo. And sometimes it doesn't always look exactly like the photo. In theory, if everything goes right, it will look exactly like the photo, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So I think that if you're going into your test knits with an open mind, with generosity and grace for the person that you're testing for, then all should be well. Another thing to consider is I have heard a couple stories of some newer designers who haven't been as kind to their testers and has treated them much more so as free labor. That's not ideal. So I would say if you are dealing with a situation like that, finish the test if you can, but if not, I have no problem with people pulling out of tests if they are in a really toxic situation. So just make sure that you are taking care of yourself. I think an important thing to think about when you're going into tests is that the knitwear community is very much a community of people, but it's also unregulated. You're not going into a test and not every single one is going to be the same. So be willing to expect the unexpected, be willing to go with the flow, and hopefully you'll be with a great community of people that you can kind of find camaraderie with and get through this process together. And at the end, you'll have a beautiful pattern and a beautiful knitwear piece to come out of it. One thing that I also didn't mention is that not all test knits require a full finished object. For example, I wore this sweater because I've been using it a lot as an example. Every single Story Nerdland pattern that I've tested, which I think has been 3, has only required myself to knit the yoke and an arm of the pattern, just so that she can test basically the parts that are complicated about a pattern. This is decently common. I am currently on a test knit for the Knit Pearl Girl, where she is making a pattern that was previously a crew neck into a V-neck, and she only requires us to knit the body. So make sure that you're reading that text in the body of what you're testing for, and they will specify. And you may be looking at a turnaround being like, oh, it's only a month. But you may only have to knit the body, and the sleeves you can do afterwards, which is also huge. I'm going to talk briefly about some amazing changes I've seen in the test knitting community, even in the past year, and also changes that I've seen since I've seen other people talk about testing that have done it for much longer than I have. One thing that I've seen is people being more generous. I think people or knitwear designers are starting to realize that it can be an arduous process on their testers, and some designers have turned around and have thought of unique and new ways to be more generous with their testers. I've seen some knitwear designers, I believe Amy Scher has done this before, I might be wrong, but has offered yarn sponsorships for her testers in maybe 1 or 2 of them. So a test group is usually like 2 per size at least. So you're looking at maybe 20 testers, and she has offered for people who can't necessarily afford to test, can't afford the yarn, to sponsor yarn for 2 of her testers. I think that's amazing. I've also seen testers offer more to their designers. So for example, the Knit Pearl Girl offers, I don't know if she does this with all of hers, but in the past test that I did, she actually gave us 3 free patterns of hers, which I think is amazing, and I think is also an amazing marketing opportunity, because I have since made more of her patterns because I've gotten them for free, and she already knows these people are able to make good photos, and so you're putting them out in the world and you're getting more of your patterns out in the world, which I think is an amazing idea. I've also seen some testers offer for other people to offer yarn sponsorship, so like a gift giving train sort of situation. So like someone will give extra money so that someone else is able to test. And most of the time, most knitwear designers, especially if they're a little bit more established, they will have a discount code for you to buy yarn at a specific store. And so a lot of the UK designers will have a specific store. I've noticed it much more with them, but some of the American designers as well will say, hey, if you'd like to use the yarn that I have used, you can go to, say, Knitting for Olive, and they will give you 10% off of the yarn. It's usually not substantial. I almost never test knit something in the initial yarn that they had used, because I'm usually trying to test knit from stash. But if you are looking at a pattern and you're like, actually, I do want to buy the yarn for that, usually in the test knit, you will get some kind of discount. I've also seen designers very intentionally calling out or featuring their testers either on their Ravelry page or on their Instagram page, and that is another way of giving back and saying thank you, is by featuring their work. Another way that I've seen testing really come alive in the past year is people looking again for more diverse people in their test groups and being much more intentional, not only in doing that, but in saying they're doing that and encouraging other knitwear designers to do that as well. I love to see it. It's really cool. I don't know if I have much else to say about test knitting, but if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll try and answer, or if you have any answers for people that may be asking questions, please leave them down below. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you get on the next test knit that you want to get on. And I'll see you next time. Bye!